measures. We have to do that, 3 cents on the dollar. I think everybody's heard the Premier say that. We're trying to apply it across the board to spread it out instead of targeting all on one. Healthcare is a big one. We are going to maintain our healthcare funding. Healthcare funding will not be cut. I want to be clear on that. Our healthcare funding will remain and actually will increase next year, based on our previous budget. But with that, every change that we make within our healthcare industry, the design behind it is to push that money to the front line so that we are doing more surgeries. We're dealing with the backlog, that we're improving the system. So every change we make in healthcare, you're gonna hear, they're cutting, they're cutting, they're cutting, they're cutting. The reality is no. Healthcare spending will increase next year, and every change we make, that money will be directed internally in that ministry to improve that ministry, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, whether it's community and social services. That is the design of everything we're doing. When we talked about efficiencies in the election, that's what we're trying to do. There is no cuts. This is all about driving efficiencies and then reinvesting that money back into that ministry to improve the service so that for once taxpayers are getting what they're paying for.
What do you think are the best news stories in Alberta right now? What do you want people to be like thinking about at Christmas time in terms of what we really have to look forward to? Because besides a conservative government, so like
you took away my answer.
That's an easy one. Yeah, what do we really, in your estimation, are going to look most forward to in your term?
Well, I think out of anything, we are. I think we have a lot to look forward to in Alberta. I mean, we've seen a lot of hurdles, but like I said at the start of this, I live in an amazing community with amazing people, with amazing businesses, and through all this hardships or hurdles or things that have happened, I've seen innovation, I've seen creative ideas, I've seen everybody stepping up and moving forward. That's really exciting to see. So I guess out of anything, like I said, there is hope on the horizon. Things are turning around, things will improve. We find, like I said to everybody, you finally have a government that's fighting for Alberta, not against Alberta. And I think with that, as we move forward, things will get better. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. Through all these hard decisions are about making things and improving things for the future. And not, like I said, being the government that ignores the situation, is happy with status quo, and is going to kick the can down the road. With that, I always say to everybody, what do we have to look forward to? I think we have to look forward to the fact that, personally, I believe Justin Trudeau is not going to be able to hold this minority government together for a very long time. I look forward to a new leader to the CBC party. I look forward to a new strong platform from them, and I look forward to the next federal election and a federal conservative government.
Okay, with that, I feel like I could maybe turn this over the floor. I feel like I hit the major issues with you. I feel like you got to talk about most of the things, so I think we could take a few questions from the floor. So why don't I switch you microphones?
Sure.
And Todd, you got a question? I can walk around happily. Does anybody have any questions? What did I miss that you want to hear about from RJ? Come on, I didn't do that thorough of a job, did I? You have a question too? Okay.
Thank you very much. RJ, I'm a retired educator, and a long time ago since I've been in administration, so I can't say whether it's good or bad as far as like the budgets are. But I will say, Alberta kids do the best in the world. They're ranked very high in the world. So just like you're proud of oil and gas, I'm also proud of our kids in our schools.
Absolutely. want to be clear when I say that I am absolutely 100% proud of everything we do here in Alberta, and our teachers and everything that they invest into our system. And this is where I hope, out of anything, my biggest hope actually for next year and everything that we're doing is that we can find a way to work together. I feel like when it gets into it, when I approach teachers one-on-one, we're first of all, we got to find a way to communicate so we're both sitting on the same, I'll say it right now, ATRF, pensions. I'll hit this one. This is an ugly topic, and I'll talk about it. I'm not hiding from anything right now.
It's me.
When, yeah, it's you. It is,
Exactly.
and that's why I'm bringing it up. It's, like I said, I'm not going to sit up here and hide from any issue. Tough decision. Caught me off guard as well. To be honest, Travis Taze, I trust the man as our Minister of Finance. I really do trust him. I looked at his business plan. I really dove into the numbers, which was probably one of the most confusing things ever, because we were getting pumped out numbers out of the union that were in such stark comparison to the numbers that we were looking at from all of our comparisons on our 10-year average. We were showing AIMCO and ATRF as a difference of only 0.1. On a August 2018 to August 2019, we were showing a difference of only 0.1. And his business case was all the other public sector pensions are there. He was looking at a possible global recession. AIMCO has a larger scale than the ATRF. He really fundamentally would see through the administrative ends a save of 0.25%, which was $41 million. I believe it's there. And with that, AIMCO is invested into a lot more Alberta real estate, which gives a lot more security to the fund, especially when we're teetering into a global recession. People got to understand that the instability between the United States and China right now is tearing up the global investment market. And we have to be very careful where we're putting our money. In no way, shape, or form, this is, and I want to be clear, teachers deserve their pensions. They deserve the pensions they worked for. They have defined pensions, and they deserve that money. And I wouldn't have supported what he was doing if that was going to affect that in any way, shape, or form.
Good.
I know that teachers are uneasy about the move, and they feel a little slighted. But I do also have to say that they will still have their strategic board that's going to be overlooking that pension plan. And I hope over time that they understood we were doing this for the benefit of twofold. We feel it's a good move for the teachers, and we also think it's a good move for the other 50% of the fund, which is contributed by the taxpayers as well. And like I said, I want to be clear in saying teachers deserve their pensions, and as a government, we're going to back those pensions, and we're going to make sure they're there for teachers. And I would never let anybody rip that away from teachers.
Yes, sir. One quick question. Oh, Todd, I am standing, by the way.
Okay, good.
Just thought I'd mention that. One quick question about the logging. Now, recently we've had logging trucks going down 16th Avenue out to Highway 22. Now, my problem with that is that road is not designed for heavy logging trucks. Who's responsible for authorizing that?
Well, it would be an agreement through Ag and Forestry, and this is not the first time I've heard of it. So I've actually elevated this up to the Minister of Agriculture and Forestry to ask him on what the design is and if there's a review possible to be done on what they're doing up there to make sure they're not having an impact on the environment. I'm waiting to hear back from the Minister of Ag and Forestry to make sure that they are abiding by every regulation that they're required to do so they're not affecting streams and or rivers in play there.
It's also the fact that that road, especially with the snow on the banks and stuff, it's not really wide. And yesterday there was a close call on there with one logging truck being over the middle of the road, forcing a pickup truck coming the other way to almost go in the ditch. This is a little dangerous. So if something can be done, it'd be nice.
like I said, I did receive a letter on it. So receiving a letter, I'm putting it through the process with Ag and Forestry, and I can also raise the issue with the Minister of Transportation to have it looked at as well.
Thank you.
The town was aware of that, and we understand the concerns because we have the same concerns and had the same concerns. But where the load comes out, they really didn't have an option to go south. That would have been the way to get them to go down to the other highway past Longview. That wasn't an option because there was a big steep hill that the trucks couldn't make. So it's not ideal at all. We understand that it's a slow speed, which is good, but. We would have liked them to be able to go someplace else, but there really wasn't any options, and we were aware of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ron Thompson. I've taken the last month to study both sides of this climate change thing. Mm-hmm. And that is as far as I can see, the elephant in the room nationally, because that's starting to drive all the agendas, all the thinkings. And here, little old Alberta winds up being the butt of everybody's angst. What's the position of the government here to counteract this onslaught, unjustly I believe, but onslaught that's starting to pinch off our oil, pinch off our gas, and limit our ability to get our commodities to market? So I think we really need a strategy to manage that. Do you have a sense of what that is or where you're going with
that? We do, and that's what I'm saying. The main purpose of the CEC that we talk about, the Canadian Energy Centre, that was created, talked about in our election as, I guess, for lack of a better term, I don't like using it, but war room, our energy war room. And that is strictly designed to be able to communicate and educate better, and that we can also talk about what we're doing here in Alberta. I think one of the most exciting things that we're doing, and now that we've got it in place, that of course we don't get any media coverage on, is our TIER plan, Technology, Innovation, and Emissions Reduction Plan, that we've established with our heavy emitters. And the funds from this, 50% of the funds going from this, are going to actually help to diversify our economy here in Alberta. Hundreds of millions of dollars will be invested into developing technologies, innovations, emissions reduction strategies, to be able to engineer new technology here that can be sold around the world, so that we are not only just the most environmental and ethical producers, that we also are the most environmental technology developers in the world, to be able to utilize putting that technology and those innovations across the planet. I think it has a twofold impact that people don't seem to give us credit for. And I think in a lot of ways, this is what we were talking about when we said a carbon tax, to me, doesn't change anything. Plans like our TIER plan that are dealing with our heavy emitters, that give them sustainable goals, using a best as natural gas strategy, are responsible ways that we can improve our environment and to be able to have, for once, a real measurable effect. So that after 4 years, people can come back to us and go, how much of a positive impact has this had in a megaton drop in Alberta? We'll have the numbers for them. And twofold with that, ESG, or environmental social governance, is something that these companies in Alberta actually want. Whether you talk to Suncor, Syncrude, Imperial, CNRL, they want to be a part of environmental social governance. They actually want to be a part of that. They want the government to be a part of that. They want the government aiming them in a direction, because for them, they want to be responsible on that level as well. And to be honest with you, they're big corporations. It gives them a marketability that nobody else has around the world. And that's why I believe that we run into so much resistance, both from what I believe is activists protesting here that are foreign funded to stop our oil from getting to Tidewater, or gas to Tidewater. Because being the fourth largest reserve, with that high level of ESG, environmental social governance, we would actually take it, my personal opinion, if we do get to Tidewater, I think they're fearful that we would take a very large market share away from the OPEC dictator oil, Venezuelan oil.
Absolutely.
Because I think around the world, countries like France, countries all over the UK want to buy from the most environmental, ethical producer. And I think that's why we're running into so much resistance. And to prove this, just when we talk about this is not fear-mongering coming from the UCP. I spoke to it in the House, there was a activist group called Eco Oil Activism that popped up here in Alberta, and the Minister of Justice Act, under our new law, asked for an audit on them to make sure they're being locally funded under our new regulations. The next day, the Tides Foundation wrote a check to them for $815,000 to battle us in court against the audit, which is just a clear signal. I mean, if you got nothing to hide, I mean, Vivian Krause opened it up and really has made a lot of people realize that people here are protesting not because we are the worst oil producer. They're protesting because they're scared of what might happen if we actually do become a world player in the market.
One of the things John was really effective in saying at the chamber luncheon when he was asked about, I asked him, like, what are we going to lose on with the Liberals being in government? And he said, we're going to stay with carbon tax. We're going to have to live with that. And he was critical of the business groups, the business industry, of not being vocal enough about their support of the Conservative platform, and the fact that we have all of these groups supporting what I will call the left and these environmental platforms, and getting up and getting very noisy and writing really big checks to lobby groups that are being very, very effective. But we really have very few of those on the right and in the business groups doing the same thing for lobbying for economic policy and for fiscal conservative policy. And I will say that John was really quite horrified by that, was critical of the chambers who claim to be nonpartisan and then support fiscal conservative policy, and echoes your sentiments, I think, on the national level as well.
Yeah, I think that's one of the toughest things. I mean, we're battling an uphill battle when it comes to our environmental plan. When I talk about the tier plan, most people look at me going, "What? I never heard of it." Right? I mean, the fact that we implemented such an innovative new environmental plan in Alberta that has an impact of, you know, being able to invest in new technologies and diversification, all these wonderful things, and I don't even think it hit. I don't even think it hit the paper. So we're gonna battle an uphill battle. That's a lot of what it's about. I'm hoping our model here will actually give a basis point that once we start getting once we start looking at implementing a couple years in, we'll be able to gauge the impact of what we're doing with this program. And I'm actually hoping that becomes a model that can be utilized throughout Canada, and something that maybe Conservatives might use in their federal platform.
I have a question back here.
Sorry. You've heard in the media that 48% of the families in Canada are $200 away from losing their home or not being able to eat. I'm part of the food bank here in Turner Valley, and I see the fluctuations. I see what happens when recession starts to hit, and it's not pretty. Our last food drives, we had many families who would give to the food bank who said, "I need to use the food bank." We've never had that before. My question is, are we going to still continue with grade 7 economics in this province and in the municipalities, where the little boy goes to his dad, he knows his dad will always give him $1, all he has to do is just take it? Are we going to continue down that road in this province and in our municipalities? Because that is what's happening, and that's driving people into situations that they just don't want to be in.
Well, I'm not sure I totally grip what you mean on a provincial level in that manner of the grade 7 economics. I'm sorry, I'm missing the question. I apologize.
In this municipality, if they want something, that's added on to the ratepayers. That's what I'm talking about. Nobody wants to talk about that. Everybody thinks they're doing a great job. But in this municipality, all the taxes go just to pay the wages. Everything else has to be generated by other things, not called taxes, levies, and all kinds of things. When are we going to fix the model?
Well, like I said, as a province, we are continuing to work with our municipalities, but we don't govern our municipalities in the way they establish their taxes. You know, that's why they have elections every 4 years, is to be able to hold them accountable the same as we do every 4 years. I know on a provincial level, we're trying to do absolutely everything we can possible to prevent any additional cost to taxpayers. That's why we're fighting the federal carbon tax. We entered into that lawsuit just days ago to be able to stop that implementation, which we feel is unfair because of the cost and the little, or what I feel, next to no impact on taxpayers. We're trying to look at, like I said, on our end, on a provincial level, to be able to maintain what we're spending. That's why I've had people approach me and actually say, oh, the fix to Alberta is to implement the provincial sales tax. And I actually look at them and I said, you do realize I'm not going to do that, because that's just more cost on to people, the cost of living every day. And I'll be the first one to admit that we're actually we're not spending the taxpayers' money as efficiently and as effectively as we can right now. So I refuse to go back to the taxpayers until we get our government in order and we start addressing those issues. And like I said, those are the tough decisions. We've minimized departments throughout our government in order to bring our costs in line, and we're trying to minimize the impact. I do realize there's some things, and we talk about the policing model. There is a cost to that. It has to be paid for. It's revenue in, money out. That's an impact to taxpayers in this area, and we own that. But the critical boiling point of where rural crime is sitting right now, this was the best manner possible, we felt, to address that issue for dealing with policing, because the reality is those 300 additional officers cost money, and the money has to come from somewhere. And you know, we're trying to keep that as minimal as possible as we go through, and we're going to continue to try to find as many savings as we can as we move forward.
But you haven't really answered my question. There's 48% of the people who are $200 away from being out of their home, no employment, and they see no hope. What is the province doing to help alleviate that? Or is it even on the radar?
Well, it's absolutely on the radar, and that's why we're doing everything we can to fix our economy so we can get people back to work. I mean, the reality of the situation is the only fix to that is to fix our economy. We have to continue to fight tooth and nail to find innovative new solutions and get our economy driving back in the right direction, because throwing money at it for any reason and running the province any further into debt is only a short-term Band-Aid kicking the can down the road that only makes things tougher. 4 years from now, makes the cuts even harder, if you want to call them cuts. So yeah, we got to fight. And trust me, there's not a person in this government that doesn't understand how many people. I sat on doorsteps with people breaking down, crying in front of me, people I've never even met. Were telling me stories of about how they've been laid off and they're not even sure how they're going to feed their kids next month. We get it. I've been doing everything I can. I know our premier hasn't stopped tirelessly. I've stared at his window, lights on at 3 o'clock in the morning. We're going to continue to fight in every avenue, every angle we can to get this economy jump-started again. And, you know, this is a lot about what Sara was talking about. you know, my wife with the chamber has been working on initiatives about eliminating the things we can tackle, like red tape, and clearing the way for our job creators so that it makes it easier for them, so we can start bringing that back as quickly as possible. Because without a strong economy, there's nothing that can tell you that would be substantial enough to really deal with that. But yeah, it's about getting our economy going.
One more question.
Yeah, maybe it's two. Yeah, so like I think part of the people's problems during recessions is that it's managing money. I think it would be very, very beneficial that in the school system that we teach financial fundamentals to our students so they know how to, you know, manage money, control debt, you know, budget, stuff like that. So that's something that, you know, could be looked into or something like that.
Well, it's funny that you talk about that because we're in the middle of a curriculum review again right now, and we're actually looking into that. And I don't disagree with that at all. I mean, Leanne and I have talked about it over and over again on how, you know, with our three boys, how do we address this issue? You know, they've come out of school and we've had conversations. I mean, for example, I think one of the most frustrating conversations I had was exactly that. Friends of my oldest son is 22, and they went and financed a truck, and they got into one of those bad financing deals. They were paying 21.5% on a truck.
Yeah.
And they had no idea the impact of what that actually equated to. They didn't even really understood what that meant at the end of it and how much they were paying with that truck, or even how interest was applied to the loan or lease. Yeah, we're failing our kids in that manner. Credit cards, how to manage, how to balance a budget, how to deal with that, and that's something that should be implemented and built on. And even to broaden that out, we should probably be talking about political economics as well. To be honest, I sat in a room with kids ranging between 17 and 21, and I actually had them say to me, well, why don't you just provide free daycare? Or why don't you provide free this? And I said, because free isn't free. And they looked at me with a blank stare, and they said, well, if it comes from the government, it's free. And I looked at them and I said, well, where do you think the government gets our money? And one of them actually piped up and said, well, you guys just print it. And I was sitting there going, I was actually blown away. I was stunned. I didn't even know what to say. So yeah, we got to build on that. I think it's a part of our curriculum that we should implement much stronger, because we need to be preparing our kids when they get out into the real world, so they're not, I don't want to say preyed on, but that they don't make bad financial decisions like buying a $30,000 truck at age 19 with 21.5% interest on it. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and my second question is with the province wanting to add to the police force for rural crime, what's being done to lengthen sentences for repeat offenders and like opioid dealers, and you know, like kind of like what stems from most of the rural crime problem?
This is a tough one. I'm actually glad you brought that up because I didn't speak to it. When we expanded the province, it's tough, right? The federal end of it, just recently, Justin Trudeau passed a bill that actually decriminalized a lot of offenses, including things like theft under, you know, I think it's theft under 1,000 now, a lot of other things. He actually decriminalized it. So we had to take a creative approach, and this was actually something we worked on and, as the Rural Crime Caucus Committee was, we're trying to look at creative ways to be able to impact that. And that's why when we actually established the Trespass Act, and when we looked at it, we said, well, what can we do with this? And we said, well, let's increase the fines. That's something that is under the provincial purview. And that's why when you hear about the new Trespass Act, the first offense is 10,000, second is 25,000. Because what we can do with numbers that big is we can implement jail sentences for non-payment fines. That's all we really have in the purview of the provincial government. Other than that, with repeat offenders, it comes down to the federal government. Every time we're moving in one direction, we have Ottawa moving in the other direction. lessening the sentences, which are making things tougher. So we're going to have to continue to find creative ways, like what we did in Bill 27 with the Trespass Act, to be able to implement jail time and try to curb it on the front end. But I also have to be honest that we need to start to find a way to be not just reactive on rural crime. We have to find a way to be proactive. We have to find a way to create, new ways to be able to engage the community so youth aren't ending up as into the perpetual circle of crime. We need to find ways to invest, and that's why we invested an additional $100 million into mental health and addictions, because we have to find ways to get these repeat offenders. A lot of our repeat offenders, they're addicted to drugs. They're opioid addicts. They are fueling their drug habit off of stealing out in the rural areas, because that's how they're fueling their habit. So we have to find a way to be proactive, and we got to start addressing the mental health issues in order to be able to really actually make a difference. And we also have to get out with our youth and our communities and building through everything from the Office of the Child Youth Advocate right down to community and social services, and start building. If we start identifying youth or troubled youth that are headed down this path of crime, we have to be able to find ways to connect with these kids ahead of it and curb them away from what becomes a life of crime or addiction after the fact. So unfortunately, when you say strengthening, getting back to your question, that's a federal purview. They're the ones that give us all the sentencing. We just as a province have to enforce what they put in place as the federal government. So that would be more of a question for John Barlow, but definitely we do have non-stop conversations about this, both John and I. Trust me, he's very much on page with battling in the same manner, and is frustrated with some of the changes that have come from the Liberal government in Ottawa.
You are always so generous with your time, and I know that's your job, but your family's here, and it's Christmas time, and it is always so refreshing to speak with you, because you're so candid and transparent and so willing to talk about hard issues face on. So on behalf of all of us here tonight and behalf of all your constituents, I wish you and your family an extremely and very, very Merry Christmas, and I hope you get some time off and are able to enjoy it and spend some less time at the rink over the next couple of weeks. RJ's and my kids both play hockey, and we often see each other at bright early times in the morning at Saturday at 6 a.m. Yeah, that's delightful. So thank you so very much, and a very Merry Christmas.
Just before I go as well, thank you, Sarah. This is always enjoyable. I enjoy doing this as well. Todd.
Yes, thank you.
The Valley Neighbors Club, everybody that came out here, thank you again. I hope everybody has a very Merry Christmas and enjoys some time with their family and friends. Before I leave, I'm going to put a stack of my business cards probably just on that table at the back there, and I want everybody, if they please, to take a card, and if anything pops up, please do engage me and my office at any time you need anything. Once again, thank you everybody for coming, and I hope you enjoy your holidays. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks RJ. Thanks Sarah very much for taking care of this for us. You did a fantastic job as usual. We do have one shining star business that we're all very, well, when I say we all, I mean me, and maybe a couple others in the room are very, very fond of. And we're happy to have David here with us tonight, Dave Farron from the distillery. And so on behalf of the Turner Valley Ratepayers Board, I have a little Christmas cheer. It's a non-perishable food item. And we hope you both enjoy those in good health.
Thank you.
And responsibly. Thank you again for being here. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.